Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good whatever time of day it is. Thank you for tuning in to Conversations with Dr. Don. The show is produced and broadcast from Portland, Oregon, USA. And for your first-time viewers, Conversations with Dr. Don is an ongoing series of one-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like most of you out there about who they are as unique, one-of-a-kind individuals and about whatever it is we have decided to talk about. And this evening we'll be talking to David Rogers, the Executive Director of the Oregon ACLU. And we've chatted a few times on the phone, and that's as far as we've gotten. And I've seen him here for the first time in the flesh in the last 15 to 20 minutes or so. And just by looking at him, I can tell we're going to have a good conversation.
Right. Thanks for having me.
You betcha. How are you feeling right now?
Feeling good.
Not nervous?
You know, always a little.
Okay. I'm always a lot nervous. But after a couple of minutes, I get going pretty good, no problem. So, as I said earlier, questions that you don't want to answer, don't have to answer them, and we'll just flow and go with what's going on. And before you know it, the time will fly by, and you'll have a good time.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Okay, so let's start with the bio section. Who are you? You want to know who I am? On rare occasion, I do a little spiel about myself.
Okay.
Okay. I was born in New Orleans, Louisiana, of red, white, and black Roman Catholic parentage on December 26, 1928. Today, I am a-religious and accepting of all others. I'm a retired PhD clinical psychologist and present-day television broadcast journalist. I'm the 12th of 12 children, am married, and am the father of 5 daughters by a first marriage. Politically, I'm a progressive populist activist, still learning how to live lovingly. Still learning how to live lovingly. A few of my heroes include Jesus, Gandhi, MLK, and any other fellow human who is currently living lovingly. That's so important to me in the rest of my years, living lovingly and walking the talk. And as you can see by my heroes, that's how they were.
Yeah.
And I was a Roman Catholic kid growing up that way, and went to the seminary and discovered that I didn't have a calling. And luckily, in time, I got out and decided I was going to be an atheist or an agnostic or one of those kinds of things. Okay, you ready for you?
Sure.
So if I were to ask your best friend, who is David Rogers? Who is it? What would he or she say? David is what? Just be your best friend.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I don't know. I mean, I talk a lot of smack in the world, so they might start with that. You know, I think they'd describe me as someone who is progressive, activist, politically committed to trying to be the change that I want to see in the world. I really appreciated what it is you said about yourself. I think that we definitely need to see a lot more love in the world, and it's important to challenge ourselves to be able to live our values. Sometimes it's harder than it sounds, and you know, but if it was easy, right? I think that that's what actually makes us better people, and that's what builds better communities. But I think that those are some of the qualities that people would use in terms of describing me.
Did you see this sign?
I did. Good stuff.
I've got about 60 of those through the years. And that's my favorite one. I've been using that one now for about 6 weeks or 2 months, and I'm lingering with it because I get such lovely reactions, and even a very few people who get upset with it, I still manage to talk to them. And whether they realize it or not, if they talk to me and pay attention to me, I'm satisfied.
Yeah, it's really, you know, we gotta figure out how to be able to talk with one another, even when it is we disagree or we think we disagree, because without that level of civility and engagement, we're not going to get anywhere as a community, as a society.
And you knew David Fidanki, your predecessor.
That's right. That's right. He was the executive director of the ACLU of Oregon for I want to say about 25 years.
A long time, yeah.
Definitely. He decided to retire about a year and a half ago, and a well-earned retirement.
Mm-hmm. He didn't tell me you were coming aboard, though.
Well, I don't think he knew that I was coming aboard when he made the decision, but you know, I stay in touch with him, and you know, whenever someone has that level of organizational experience, you want to keep them close for sure. And he's available to the organization, and continues to be a strong supporter of the ACLU of Oregon.
Next time you talk to him, mention that you came on the show and you and I had a chat.
I will, absolutely.
When and where were you born?
I was born in 1970 in Hartford, Connecticut.
Connecticut,
yeah.
New Englander.
That's right. That's right. I grew up in and around Hartford. Went to college in Massachusetts. So I really grew up in the Northeast and in New England, and I've been out here in Portland for just under 20 years.
Oh, it's a while.
It is. It is a while. I'm here to stay. I really, there's so much to like about Portland and Oregon, and you know, and I'm happy to be out of the Northeast.
Mm-hmm. So you've been away from there for a long time.
I have.
You want to go back?
Well, I have tons of friends and family back there, so so I go back to visit. But I'm more than happy with where it is I'm at right now.
Yeah. Okay. Trick question. I always got one for you.
Okay.
Why were you born?
Why was I born? Was I born with a purpose?
Everyone always asks that question right back at me.
You know, I don't know. You know, I guess it's the role of everyone to move through life and try and figure out what your purpose is. And I don't know why I was born, but I certainly feel like one of the things that I'm trying to do is, you know, move through the world with a sense of purpose, and that is actually to really advance progressive social change, to be able to lift up values of justice, of fairness, of equality, of love, and to make sure that those values are a central part of how it is the world works, and whether that's changing laws, changing institutions, because we got a lot of work to do. There is, when it comes to thinking about justice and fairness and equality and love.
How did you get to think the way that you do and have those kinds of sentiments?
You know, I definitely, my parents definitely politicized me significantly.
Oh.
And I grew up in a multiracial household, so
I gathered as much.
Yeah, and you know, I think that and so we certainly experienced a wide range of you know, tough things, whether it's discrimination, racism, prejudice, and but you know, societally, institutionally. My parents were activists themselves, and so they really instilled in me that sense of justice.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm grateful for that.
How about the racial heritage, black and white?
Yes, that's right. That's right.
And which is which? You want to talk about that for a moment?
Sure. My father is black, my mother is white.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No red?
You know, my grandmother on my father's side may have some Native American backgrounds, but I'm less than clear about that. So
I always say, when people say, "What are you?" I say, "I'm red, white, and black," not necessarily in that order. And if you ask any more questions, I'll just have to lie because I don't know.
Yeah. That's great. I mean, we're really like, look, that is who America is, and it's you know, we're a multiracial society, and you know, increasingly so. I mean, the population of people of color in Oregon has doubled in the past 20 years. We're trending in that direction, and so you know, pretty soon we will be the norm. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And we'll leave them in the dust somewhere. I was surprised to see that you were the color that you are, because I expected you to be white. David Rogers, you know?
Yeah.
And then I thought, oh, wonderful. Let's see where we go with this and what kind of similarities we have in our stories and our heritage and that sort of a thing. And that's where we are right now. Religious preference, do you have one of those?
I don't. I consider myself agnostic. And, you know, I grew up where attending a congregational church, but my mother also said, like, look, you really, although you may attend this church, it's really up to you to decide what you believe, and so I took that really seriously and tried to learn about a variety of religions, and you know, ultimately, I wouldn't consider myself an atheist. I think I'm always open to the possibility.
Sure. Yeah, interesting, because your countenance and how you look, and I see you've got like a Ho Chi Minh beard, which turned me on anyhow, because Ho was a friend of mine. Okay. But then your upper lip is shaved, so is he a Muslim or what? And then the hair says that you look like you're in Benghazi or someplace in North Africa. The results of this mixing. You have brothers and sisters, do you? I
do have I have a sister who's older than me. Yeah.
Is she of a like mind as you, or is she a Trump supporter?
she's carving. She's definitely not a Trump supporter. She's carving a path of justice in her own way, for sure.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where's your mom and dad now? They're back on the East Coast?
They are. They are.
Do they like you?
I hope so. You know, if they don't, they can fake it pretty well.
Okay. Yeah, and your formal education. Say a few words about that. I've went up to getting an undergraduate Bachelor of Arts degree from a small liberal arts school in Massachusetts. And I majored in political science and international development. And you became a lawyer?
I am actually not a lawyer.
Really?
You know, it's interesting when people find out that I work with the ACLU, they oftentimes assume that I'm a lawyer. It is an organization full of lawyers, but I am not one, nor do I play one on TV. I think that, you know, ultimately, because we are an organization who has so many lawyers on staff, lawyers on the board, we have a committee of lawyers to guide our litigation work. We actually don't need our executive director to be a lawyer. And I would say really professionally, I'm really an organizer. And so I bring that really to the table. 25 years of organizing and advocacy experience and legislative experience and political strategy.
And that stands you in good stead in this position, the executive director. And how they happen to choose you over somebody else who is a lawyer?
I don't know. You'll have to ask them. I think that they made a pretty good choice, though.
I think so, too. I can tell. So this is your full-time job now, executive director?
Yeah, more than full-time, definitely. I take it home at night, and you know, there's so much to be done, but it's important work. I'm deeply committed to it.
Yeah. Partner, boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife? I
have a wife. We will be experiencing our first anniversary next week. So
congratulations.
Thank you. Time flies, I'll tell you, but definitely it's a wonderful thing for sure.
Yeah. What do you think of your, what's her name?
Allison.
What do you think of Allison? You look right in the camera and tell her, Allison,
Well, I thank you for being with me, and you know, continue to be you.
Good show, good show. Any children?
No children.
No children. No, yeah. And your political persuasion. You're a right winger. It's the last time I'm going to ask you that.
Yeah, I would describe myself as progressive, and you know, I think that that's different than being liberal in a number of ways. You know, being progressive is really, first of all, I think if you're progressive, you have to be self-reflective.
Yes.
You know, but it's also really about making connections across communities, across issues. You know, oftentimes I think liberals, they think about, you know, okay, well, they're pro-choice, and maybe they think of themselves as opposing racism, but you know, you got to be making connections across issues, you know, and recognize the links between immigrant rights and criminal justice and reproductive justice, and have a more complicated and complex analysis.
Yeah, and for me, it's constantly reflecting on what I'm about, and occasionally, when there's old bugaboos that I didn't outgrow in New Orleans, and I find there is a bit of chauvinism left, or a little racism, because in New Orleans there were 3 races when I grew up, you know. There was a colored, and then the white and the Creole. And people like me, we thought we were better than the colored. And even now and then, there's something like that I will detect in me as I'm looking at a person without even saying anything, and saying, I'm looking at a black person here, not a human being first. And having that being the leading consideration in this human being that I'm about to experience or visit with.
Yeah.
And I used to feel sad or upset that I still had some of those tendencies underneath that not acting on anymore. But I find that I'm grateful that I'm now aware of it more often.
Yeah.
And particularly chauvinism, male chauvinism, and I smile at it now because when she busts me or some woman nails me, it doesn't happen very often, I'm so grateful.
Yeah, those are learning moments. Like, you know, I mean, even with the best intentions, we can make mistakes, and I think that part of life is it's a constant learning process. And rather than be defensive, rather than beat ourselves up about it, I think it's great to just acknowledge when you make a mistake. Acknowledge, hey, apologize, and recognize it as a learning moment. And then, you know, that's our room to grow, and we all have it, unquestionably.
You ever discover some unfinished prejudice working inside of you that you weren't aware of before? Yeah. I put my hat away. I slipped it on.
This is the psychologist?
Yes. Sorry, David. Can't answer that if you don't want to answer it.
Yeah. Well, you know, I actually you can go online and take the kind of implicit bias test, right? And which I think is pretty interesting.
I've not done that though.
I did that recently around race and ethnicity. And I have to say that, like, I did pretty well. And I think that my challenge is really, it's like, you know, not to necessarily put people in a box. But even if I have put them in a box, to be actually open to engaging them. You know, I'll tell you, I was just out in the Oregon coast last weekend, and driving home, we came across 3 different Confederate flags, and you know, it's like, okay, what's that about? You know, I think it's pretty easy for me to put that person in a box, and you know, but maybe there isn't as harsh a thought to it. But I will say that, like, the truth of the matter is, I mean, I got, you know, since you asked, I'm going to come clean and using it as an example. Sure. It's like, I feel in some ways it's almost worse seeing it in a place like Oregon, far away, right, from the South, because to some degree, right, like if you're white and you grew up in the South, maybe you can kind of trick yourself into thinking that it's not kind of this inherently racist symbol that is an ode to like slavery and racist suppression, but it's kind of this like Southern cultural iconic symbol But when you're here, you know, if you're out here and you didn't grow up in the South, then in some ways you have to really be attaching it, right, to it as a symbol of racist oppression and slavery.
Yeah.
And so it almost seems kind of less excusable, if you will, to be able to fly that flag here in Oregon. But you know, I gotta say that when I see something like that, yeah, I'm definitely putting people in a box.
And it's hard not to, because of what our learnings during the early years. And with that story, I'm going to digress for a moment myself. It wasn't maybe 2 or 3 months ago. I was outside of the Portland metro area, going somewhere, and the pickup truck in front of me had the metal frame in the back pickup bed, and there were 2 ropes, and they had hangman's nooses on them.
Ugh.
1 on each post. And I'm thinking, is this just a convenient way for him to store his ropes, or is he sending me a message? And I had a hard time dealing with that.
Yeah, yeah. It's hard not to see that as a symbol of violence, right?
And it may have been innocent.
Yeah.
So, okay, what's going on underneath? Anyhow, that's enough of my story. We're talking about you now. Shall I continue?
Sure.
Yeah. Here's a loaded one for you.
Okay.
Difference between sympathy and empathy and compassion. Sympathy and empathy and compassion. Do you see a difference in those 3 terms?
Wow. That's a tough one.
You betcha.
You know, I guess I hadn't really thought that much about it. But I will say, you know, compassion seems like a really important thing that we should all try and embrace. And being compassionate towards other people, being compassionate towards ourselves. Compassion seems like it's really, in some ways, about forgiveness. It's about recognizing that life is hard, you know, whoever you are, and being a human on the planet, and it's challenging, and that you know, we need to have compassion towards other people, because not everyone is always going to be their best selves, and with compassion is what allows us to live together on this planet. Empathy is really about recognizing that to trying to put yourself in someone else's shoes, to be able to think about what it is someone is experiencing, which can provide really important insight.
And to have that feeling as best I can, the feeling that you're having right now as you and I are visiting with each other, and I see pain on you, in your face, in your eyes, and I talk to you about it, see a few words, but somehow or other you can tell that I'm feeling a little bit of what you're feeling. That's the kind of connection. That's empathy, that's so important.
Yeah, and I think empathy is much more important in some ways than sympathy, right? Sympathy to me, it means like you feel badly for someone, but you can feel badly for someone, but it's empathy, it's a sense of like trying to understand what it is people are experiencing that really allows for a connection and really allows for the level of insight that can change behavior. You know?
That's one of those questions I have here that I rarely ask. It's only if I sense that my guest can do something with that, because for a lot of people it's kind of confusing because they don't think as deeply, if I may, as we are right now, because of how and where and what we came from. But anyhow, let me continue on. Memberships in political, social, or civic organizations. You have any of those kind of memberships other than the ACLU?
You know, right now I'm mostly unaffiliated. I mean, I try and work with a bunch of organizations or groups that I feel are doing fantastic work out there. But right now, I don't feel like I'm a member of many organizations. I'm pretty sure I'm registered as a Democrat right now. I was unaffiliated for the longest time, but then when I had an opportunity to vote for Obama in the primary for the first time, I'm like, okay, I am going to make sure that I have an opportunity to do that.
Yeah. Sure.
And that's when I registered as a Dem.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we're not going to go any further with that because right now it's just a madness. Occasionally I'll hear that Hillary's taken a stand that infuriates me. Mm-hmm. Because I'm an old-fashioned liberal left like that, and she's still playing footsie with some of the Wall Streeters. But yeah. I'm digressing again. Persons from the past are alive today that you particularly admire or look up to. Any names come to mind?
I'll tell you. I'll just put out one person
sure.
who just passed recently. Muhammad Ali is someone who just really inspired me as a young person. For him, he experienced incredible hardship, standing for what it is he believed in, and that is just means so much. And it was an incredible, and he paid a dear price for it because it really took him out of the sport which he was so good at when he was at his peak. And I said early on that I like to talk some smack with friends, and whether I'm out on the basketball court or wherever, and he was the best at that. But Muhammad Ali really. I have to say, I wish there were more professional athletes right now, given the level of exposure they have with media and social media and the level of resources, who were so clear in having a progressive political focus. I think that we could see much more good happen, and I wish that there were more high-level professional athletes who had what Muhammad Ali had.
Yeah, he had big brass ones, and there's other ways to put it to it. Yeah. All right. Let's take a break and then come back and talk about the ACLU, and because you talked about personal stuff enough for now. Unless there's something more you want to ask me, or.
That sounds good. Ready to talk about some work for sure.
Okay, Mr. E, Mr. Director, can we take a break, please? Okay. We are back, and now I'm supposed to tell you that I'm glad that you didn't channel surf and disappear on me, and you missed the opening of the show. Conversations with Dr. Don that you're watching is an ongoing series of 1 hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like my guest David Rogers about who he is in the first half of the show, and now we're going to talk about the ACLU, of which I've been a member for 3,000 years. No, it just seems like it. About 35 or 40 years. So I'm so pleased to have David on, and we're having a good time right now, sharing our own thoughts and feelings about things and whatever. So the ACLU of Oregon today, what kind of thoughts do you have to that proposition? Talk about the ACLU of Oregon today.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Well, I'll tell you that, I mean, the ACLU is really about protecting and defending civil liberties and civil rights.
Mm-hmm.
And it's unquestionable that we've made a lot of progress as a society, but I'll tell you, it is also very clear that we have so much more to do. And so we're really looking at, well, what are key issues that we can focus in on and make a difference?
Okay.
And one of those issues is criminal justice, and criminal justice reform is increasingly a focus of ours. And I'm just trying to think about where to begin, you know.
Criminal justice. Why focusing on criminal justice nowadays?
Well, I'll tell you, I mean, I think that really the state of our criminal injustice system really is, it's probably the biggest driver of inequality in the U.S. today in so many ways. You know, we're incarcerating more people than any other country in the world. You know, in Oregon, the Department of Corrections has been the fastest growing state agency budget. So we're dumping tons of money into building and filling prisons. The racial disparity is off the charts. Here in Multnomah County.
In Oregon?
Yeah, in Oregon, they released data that looked at every phase of the criminal justice system and showed that there was intense racial disparity in every single phase. If you're black in the Portland area, you're 5 times more likely to end up in jail.
Why do you think that's true?
Why do I think that's true? It's a really good question. There are a range of reasons. I think that there's over-policing in communities of color. So there's a concentration of policing in communities of color, which leads to more arrests.
Yes.
There's unquestionably racial profiling, and we at this point have very few checks and balances to be able to identify both police officers and police departments that have problems with racial profiling. That's something that we're trying to do. We're trying to work on, and I think that in the 2017 legislative session there will be we're going to take some giant strides forward around racial profiling. And you know, and in all honesty, there's also bias within prosecutors' offices, and you know, there's so much emphasis right now on policing, as there should be, right? Police have the ability to take people's lives. It's the first contact people have with the criminal justice system. But I'm really interested in creating more focus on district attorneys. Right? District attorneys are the lead prosecutors in every county. They run an office of prosecutors, and basically they are the most powerful people in the criminal justice system. And
they're extensions of the police behavior.
You know, the truth of the matter is that once you're arrested and you're in the system, the person who has the most influence over what happens to you next is the prosecutor in a DA's office. And they're elected officials, and I'd say they're the most powerful elected official that no one's ever heard of. You know, they have the ability to decide whether or not you get access to addiction treatment or jail. They have the power to decide whether or not you are charged with a mandatory minimum, whether or not they can seek the death penalty. They have the power to decide whether or not a young person gets kept in the juvenile system or is treated as an adult.
What about police unions? Are they important in the consideration what we're talking about now?
Oh,
justice system?
Sure, absolutely. Police unions have tremendous levels of power. They're influencing policy. There are so many places where we could have policies at the city level that created more accountability for police that are essentially stripped away based on the contracts that police unions are negotiating. And that's something that we're increasingly paying attention to. In fact, we have just this summer pulled and gotten access to the police union contracts of the majority of cities and towns in Oregon, and we've been examining them to identify, like, what are the kind of common pieces in union contracts that are helpful, and what are the common pieces in union contracts that are deeply problematic that we need to change. And when we finish with that analysis, we will be lifting it up, because that is an area that I think, you know, certainly city officials need to be spending more attention to.
So civil liberties are threatened because of the situations you're talking about now, and the criminal justice injustice system, and the results that you were citing and the statistics you mentioned. And it seems to me, since this election anyhow, this campaign with Donald Trump and the right wing in the ascendancy, that there's been more and more behavior and more assaults and killings of black people.
Mm-hmm.
You agree with that?
Well, I'll tell you, I think that there's definitely a connection between Trump and violence. He seems to revel in being able to play to base emotions. He spews hateful, like anti-immigrants, like racist language on a regular basis. And you know, it's interesting. I mean, he's really working very hard to drive wedges between communities, and that's exactly, he's looking to take us exactly in the wrong direction, in so many ways. You know, he's a one-man constitutional crisis.
A one-man constitutional crisis. I will remember that. I wonder if I can make a sign out of that. Civil liberties, so we're talking about that aspect of civil liberties, and what about guns and Second Amendment and militias and all those kinds of things? The right-wingers are saying they want to take our guns away, and that's a civil liberty that should not be infringed.
Mm-hmm.
So do you think we should have some sort of control about guns, generally speaking, in our society, in our culture, or should you take away all guns, or what? What's your thought about guns?
Well, I'll tell you, it's an issue. It's not really an issue that I've personally focused much on, although it's an important issue. And you know, my understanding of the Second Amendment is that it shouldn't preclude you know, certain regulations of firearms, and I think that there are a wide range of smart regulations that can happen that wouldn't prevent, you know, people from being able to go out and hunt or even possess firearms, and you know, but it doesn't really seem like we can have an effective conversation at this point.
Shall we check out Wayne LaPierre and put him in jail or something?
Well, you know, he's definitely, as a civil libertarian, I have to say that he's entitled to his beliefs and his speech, even though I may disagree with him.
I think about Skokie many years ago. And it seems like every 15 to 20 years or so, there's some major event that really affects our membership, where we have a lot of people get so angry they run away from the ACLU.
Yeah.
And I've been tempted a couple of times, but and there's been one or two decisions, just only one or two, where I am still not happy with, but not to the extent that I'd want to abandon the ACLU. I had something happen many years ago when I first joined the ACLU, and I found through a friend a lawyer who was an ACLU member, and he knew what to say and who to talk to. I was suspected of some sort of an infraction that had to do with the Mann Act, and it was totally bogus. So with this ACLU attorney told me what to say and what to do and what to not do, and it just went away because he knew what he was talking about. He says, man, from now on, because if they want you, and for some reason or other, they being the powers that be, want to do something with you, like label you with a felony, for example, when it's only a misdemeanor, then there's nothing much you can do about it except be sure and get some expert help to help you wade through the complexities of the existing system. Yeah.
Well, you know, there needs to be better oversight around prosecutorial charging. There need to be standards that prosecutors and district attorneys run by. And although I think, you know, as I said before, they're the most powerful people in the criminal justice system. And so the story that you mentioned seems incredibly realistic, right? And is reflective of the reality right now. There's really not a lot you can do if a prosecutor decides to overcharge, right? But that's something we have to do something about if we're really gonna see the kind of justice system that I think we all would want to have.
What can we do?
Well, you know, in Oregon, and this is actually true. Although this statistic may be different in other states, the dynamic is very, very similar. In Oregon, almost 8 out of every 10 district attorney races, because they're elected officials, are uncontested. And so, you know, we have to reach out to smart, progressive lawyers who are interested in justice and encourage them to think about running. We need good people who are reform-minded to be thinking about running for district attorneys races. And, you know, and we need to be paying attention to those races so that when they are contested and our vote actually matters, we are voting down ballot and we're not skipping those races because, you know, they fundamentally matter. You know, let me just try out an analogy, which I will be using for the first time. So, you know, there are a bunch of things that we take for granted that, you know, we don't really think about. So when we go to a restaurant, for example, we don't really think about the fact that we have health code laws that are enforced that keep us from going to the hospital or even being killed based on the food that we eat. We never really think about that. We take that for granted, right? So, and if we knew that there was a restaurant that had a history of violations, health code violations, we would probably avoid that restaurant, you know, out of just common sense and the desire to survive, right?
Yes.
So imagine though living in a city where there was only one restaurant that you could go to, and by the way, and it had absolutely no health codes or enforcement whatsoever. So if you went there, you went to that restaurant, you were taking your life into your own hands because you had no idea whether or not the food you were getting there, and it's the only restaurant you can go to, was going to kill you. And that's actually not unlike our justice system, right? Because we have a justice system where the prosecutors have all of the power, really. You know, judges are hit with so many mandatory minimums these days. Judges really have so little decision making, and so, but yet prosecutors are operating with no standards or oversight. And yet, God forbid, if any one of us finds ourselves in the justice system, we have no choice whether or not to be there.
You can plea bargain.
You can plea bargain, and
meant to be funny. It isn't funny.
And one of the things, one of the challenges is, well, what happens, right, if then a prosecutor is overcharging you to force you to actually plea bargain, even if you have a good case. But it's scary when you're looking at the potential of serving time for long mandatory minimums, that even if you have a good case. And that's the type of thing that drives people to plea bargain. And here in Oregon, actually over 90% of all criminal cases are in fact plea bargained out. You never see a judge or jury in that respect.
Oh. What can we do to have things go in a different direction?
Yeah, well, I think that this is going to be one of those issues that the ACLU begins to work really focus on, and you're going to see us raise the visibility of these issues and find very concrete policies and ways that people can mobilize and get on board and support. We haven't quite fine-tuned the campaign, but I'd say I will just say that we're on it, and let's circle back on that one. But for now, I think it's just recognizing that this is a dynamic is really important.
You think we can see some change in the other direction in the next year or 2 or 4 years, or what? Any idea?
Absolutely. I mean, there are some, like, around racial profiling, for example. Profiling is against the law, but I'll tell you, until we get some better laws, right now, for example, it's completely voluntary for police departments in our state to be able to collect stop data, right? And so you can count the number of police departments who are actually reporting on their stop data on the fingers on one hand. And so we're going to be going into the 2017 legislative session, and we're going to be looking at trying to move legislation that would mandate that all police departments track and report on stop data. So we can begin to, and that also requires that the state does analysis, so we can begin to hone in on, well, what are the police departments for which that have serious problems profiling? And then this legislation will also include an enforcement piece, so that we can actually begin, once we identify a police department that has a problem, we can begin to move in and create change. But like, that's where we're at right now, is that right now, without actually us being able to move this legislation in 2017, we're at a pretty weak place. When police departments are basically are not required, they only are tracking the stop data on a volunteer basis, and which means that almost no one is doing it.
As I hear you say that, I don't feel very encouraged. When I think about policemen who been involved in a shooting of a civilian or a black person, then they forgot to turn on their personal
body
cams.
Uh-huh.
And sometimes it's so ridiculous, and it turned off just before the event happened, and then turned back on again where they could see what happened after.
Right.
So that comes to mind now. What are we going to do if we have any degree of success in addressing the problem you were just talking about right now? Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm pessimistic. Police unions, and I was a union steward for many years in the past life, so I believe in unions, real unions, and
so do I.
But police unions, that's something else. Mm-hmm. The power they have, and them in collaboration with the prosecutors and the DAs.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I mean, I think that, like, they've really taken the wrong approach, because it's, there's so little trust right now, right, between a wide number of communities and law enforcement. And when that trust is broken, it's impossible for them to do a good job. But I think that to a large degree, law enforcement hasn't been introspective and self-reflective about what they've done to contribute to that lack of trust. And when it comes down to it, I think that if they were really sincere and they were interested in rebuilding trust with the community, they would, rather than be fighting efforts to create some real accountability mechanisms, they would be helping to lock them in place. Because then they could say, well, look, we know most of us that are actually good folks who are trying to do the job that we've been hired to do, but there are a few bad apples. And if that's the case, and that's what you want us to believe, then you should be supporting accountability mechanisms so that we can hold those bad actors accountable. But if police unions and law enforcement as a whole are fighting mechanisms of accountability, it's really, really difficult for community members to have some sense of trust in the whole of them. You know what I'm saying?
The thin blue line is impossible.
Yeah.
It seems, but like anything else, those things that seem impossible. I think of King and Gandhi and Mandela. When it seemed impossible, they didn't give up. And as you mentioned earlier on, Ali, simple sort of a man in his thinking, and so grounded, so heroic, really, and I use that term carefully. But I'm afraid I'm really in a negative mood tonight. If we have some sort of a leader to spring up from nowhere, and how are we going to protect him because they'll take him out? No, let's go some other direction. You know what I mean?
Well, I'll tell you, you are sounding a little pessimistic, but I feel you. I mean, I think that like it's tough, right? There's seems to be a lot of instability. There are people who are being killed. There's so little accountability out there. There's so much unpredictability. That's being said, I actually am feeling optimistic. I think that there's a lot of reason to feel optimistic. Like I've been incredibly impressed with the level of activism that's happening. The rise of the Black Lives Matter movement has been absolutely fantastic. And you know, the conversation, I gotta say, about race right now, it's tricky, but it's in all honesty, I think it's in a very different, in a very a much better place than it was 3 years ago.
Okay.
And we're seeing a lot of hate and racism happening right now, and it's being fanned by presidential candidates. But at the same time, what's incredibly interesting that's happening right now that you didn't see 3 years ago is that, you know, mainstream media are talking about the comments that certain leaders have said or the actions of mainstream people, and they are labeling them racist. And you know, and so we are now having a conversation about racism without using coded language, right? And that, I think, is one of the first steps to being able to actually reconcile where this country needs to be as a fundamentally multiracial society. And you know, 3 years ago, mainstream media wasn't talking about racism. They were, you know, they weren't using the words they weren't using that language, and so in order for us to move forward, we can't sweep it under the rug, and we can't use coded language. We actually need to put it out in the open. And right now, it's out in the open. And guess what? It's kind of ugly, you know, but that ugliness is part of the process of reconciling where, you know, where we need to be. So I think that sometimes, you know, you see a little bit of ugliness, but it's part of the process. And so I am optimistic because I kind of feel like, look, we're not going to move forward unless we start getting real. And right now, we're starting to get real.
So that's a note of encouragement, and I feel a little better now.
Right on, right on.
I don't know how long it's going to be in the future before you and I are going to get together again and talk some more about the progress that you're anticipating, the direction that this Oregon chapter is going in. And for a number of other reasons, I want to see human decency and social justice progress just across the board. And I'm so involved in so many things to do with social justice worldwide, and some of the people I talk to, we go pretty global, and it's hard to come back down to earth at what we can address in the moment. And I always say to people who say, well, what can you do? I say, well, do something, however minimal it may seem or small it may seem. At least that's something, and if enough of us do a little something, maybe it'll add up and have some sort of influence.
That's right. That's right. And sometimes small steps can lead to big change, and you know, or small steps can lead to a better understanding of bigger steps. And you know, we need to not be so hard on ourselves as long as we're pushing forward and start with small things.
Okay. Well, we've got a couple of minutes left. I wonder if there's anything else on your mind that we've talked about or we haven't talked about that you would want to share with the viewers, you can look at that camera and take 30 seconds or 45 seconds to tell them something about anything at all.
Oh, wow, about anything. Well, I'll tell you, you know, it's interesting. There's this it's a long arc. You know, change is a long arc, and and as I said, I am feeling really optimistic. I think that you know, my parents got married 2 years before the 1965 Loving versus Virginia decision, which helped. It made laws that made interracial marriage illegal. It actually, and so said, like, you can't, you know, everyone should be able to marry regardless of their race. And that was in 1965. And
that was decision was Loving what? Say it again.
Loving versus Virginia. And then, you know, there continues to be this arc of change around trying to push for
fair treatment,
for just like the victory of love in ways where then last summer the Supreme Court essentially made marriage available to anyone regardless of gender, and I just think that that's like one of those things where there's this long arc of justice, and we keep moving forward, and it may take a while, but we're making progress, and I think it's just about knowing that whether we may be 20 years off on some issues, but if we don't keep working, it's not going to get done. But I actually feel like when you see that long arc of justice and how it moves forward, it's one of the things that keeps me in it.
I am going to keep that in the back of my mind, and now and then when things seem hopeless, I'm going to think about you.
Right on. So,
Mr. E, it's time for us to have a public service announcement or two, and then we're going to stop talking because he and I can go on forever and ever, okay? So you watch my shows on the web, Google Don Baham YouTube. There's a whole bunch of shows on there from years back, and to see some other interviews. And here, the ACLU, see, to learn more about the ACLU, go to www.aclu.org, and there's a phone number, and we look to hear from you, and we're ready for the ACLU, okay? And thanks for watching. And remember, KFC, I always say that, KFC, not Kentucky Fried Chicken. Back to Don's KFC. Be kind, and be friendly, and be charitable. To you too. And to you too. And to you too. Thanks again for coming around.
I really appreciate it
so much.